And Indico was one of the very first early stage tech funds.
Yes, in the world.
Bureaucracy comes often as a byproduct of making sure that public money is well spent. There was this realization that what I was doing at that point was lacking purpose. My first approved project when I entered the bank was a whole public sanitation project for 12,000 people. That work that I was doing, it changed lives. It was also hard and testing of my own integrity, of my own purpose again, and the trade-offs that inherently come with this line of work. Already in college, I started 2 enterprises, and hence there was this idea of failure.
Well, welcome to the Red Chair. Today we have a special guest, one of the partners at Indico, André Almeida Santos. Great to be your friend for so many years.
Yeah, I think that's the great
fellow partner. We've met each other in Africa, actually.
That is true.
2011.
Yes, as I think we're just recalling it, it was for sure the end of 11 when I started going more to Mozambique, and you were already there for a while.
That's right. But tell us your story. So before we get into what you do at Indico, how did it all start? Where were you born? What did you study?
I am a Portuguese, born and raised in the north, Porto, It's fascinating looking back. There's one thing that I think you probably will relate quite to this, as I studied here in Porto, and at a given point went to college in Porto as well, doing management and accounting at that point. And while at college, I had this idea since the beginning about economics and management. I got from my uncle. My father was from a different area. He was a medical doctor, and kind of sort of said, "This is good. You're probably going to give him a lot of money, so good." And so I went to that. But what is fascinating now, that this was something that came to me a few years ago only. Back then, already in college, I started 2 enterprises. At that point, you would say starting an enterprise. You didn't have startup.
A company.
Yeah, exactly. A company. Yeah.
Which year was this, more or less?
This was 97, I think. 97, and another one at 98. So there were 2 actually, with a business partner. Starting a company, being a business person, right? You were not an entrepreneur. You were like, whatever. And certainly not a founder. What is interesting about it is that one of them was on technical bookstores. I had 5 shops selling books to students, because there was a need for it at that point. And then the other one, me.
So kind of a little Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. It started like a little Amazon. It was probably at the same time. No, I'm so sorry, slightly earlier. But it did grow fast. There was demand. And then there was another one that I started also sort of more of a hobby turning to enterprise, financier sort of hobbies. It was extreme sports. So I was doing all this sort of team building weekends on canoeing, rafting, fly, rappel, paintball, which I was playing at the time. So it was this sort of, I like this. This is a great way of starting to do. There was this drive to do things, right?
Because you played almost professional paintball, right?
Semi-professionally. I was being paid for shooting people. So I'm not sure what I have this on, but yeah, okay. I think I can hold that one well. So those starting at that point, things went well until they didn't. In a way that the bookstores thrived, the other businesses well. I had to wind down the extreme sports because of working on weeks studying and then working on weekends started getting too much. So already this idea that this is just too much, let's wind down. So that went okay. There was never something to go, it was never an enterprise. But the bookstores, there was expectations there. And long story short, things with my partner didn't work out too well. There was some conflicts of interests, and eventually we did face difficulties with the store, and we had to break up the partnership and close it. Or at least we kind of closed some stuff. He did continue some other areas of the business, the ones that had conflicts, but I felt this is not where I want to go, and hence there was this idea of failure. You are very young. You're starting something that your father was like, that's not what we went for college for.
And it didn't go well.
And it didn't go well.
It that weight on you.
Correct. And I think that is also an image of our times back then, right? What Portugal was, no cultural failure. This idea that
it's still a bit like that, unfortunately.
Still today, right? And what happened next was, I panicked. And I felt like, oh my God, I just wasted my life. And so I just need to
go. It was like 2 or 3 years, right?
No, exactly. No, it's this is again, the weight of failure, right? And then, oh gosh, I need to do something really with my life. Proper. And what is more proper than going into finance? Sure. So, I doubled down on what I was doing, start working on brokerage, then asset management, did another master in finance, doing wealth management, all these things around finance and all that, getting very proficient at it, and making me, I think, a bit more serious. And sad. We will get there just about that part. I think that this is something that, again, that only came to me later, how that initial attempt at entrepreneurship as we see it today within an ecosystem that was clearly not framed for that, did leave such a strong mark that altered completely the path of my life at that point. Choosing in another sort of direction career that I wouldn't say that was not wanted, but certainly was not my first.
You went to the safe side very quickly after things didn't go exactly as expected, right?
And there was a lot of expectations from outside, my own expectations. And then turned out to be, and it was, again, at that point, an idea of let's try to fast track my career into some proper and promising future. So that
this was in Portugal. You stayed in Portugal for a few years?
Yeah, exactly. I stayed there for quite a while. And then yes, so the work with finance and all that, which was very enriching, and this, by the way, is now the 2000s. So we got to some bumpy roads there with all the crisis happening, so it was, I think, was quite good for me. Also, in what was at that point, at least initially, in a sort of a new companies, new markets. This is when also the sort of mainstream on online brokerage came, and a bit of this is when the futures market in Portugal started also to expand and then collapse at a given point. So there was a lot of excitement and going through that bubble,
finance and investing and so on.
Correct. And so then there was this realization that what I was doing at that point was lacking purpose in what was otherwise.
You didn't feel passionate about it, of course.
No. I mean, I was proficient at it, and things were going well. It's just that it felt like this is where is this leading, and again, this inherent sense of purpose, which you do have when you're launching your own business.
Right.
And I also had other sorts of engagements, even political engagements, which I usually talk less about it, but I was very politically active at that age. I think we all are when we're young. What came of that was this sort of, what came of that is why we actually met, which is at a given point, I did decide to go back to an idea of recentering my work around purpose. And I did join the African Development Bank, and serve with African Development Bank for 10 years on basically
10 years
poverty reduction and sustainable development across Africa.
And where were you based?
So I joined the bank at their headquarters at the time, which was in Tunisia, and which was great because it does give you this mega structure of a multilateral entity, which has 74 countries at that point as shareholders, and I'm there, of course, with Portuguese, the Portuguese representation, and there's 54 African countries, 25 non-African countries, donors, billions of dollars going into all sorts of projects.
When did you move to Tunisia?
End of 2007. There were a lot of funny stories of how the whole thing unfolded. By the way, I applied just as one of those. I applied for this job with a fax machine, and I think it was one of the last faxes that I ever sent. So, it was. It doesn't look that far, but it was far in so many ways. And even from my life, I think my life then shifts in all dimensions.
Okay, so and you were in Tunisia when the Arab Spring happened? What happened?
I was, and this is one of those things that you think. I look at myself as actually a risk-averse person. I'm working on venture and in Portuguese, capital de risco. But the truth is that I think thresholds of risk and what you actually feel that is at risk, it varies considerably, right? I still feel that I am risk averse. It's just that my sort of what I feel risky
on a personal level, of course.
Personal level, and it's also around what you perceive that is manageable risk. And I'm very also afraid of this idea of calculated risks, because usually most people, they're calculated until they happen, and then it's a mess. The Tunisian revolution was not a calculated risk. It happened very surprisingly from one week to another, but at least on the surface of it, but it was actually something brewing for many, many years. There was by the way, a lot of somehow similarities with the Portuguese Revolution, which also comes from this sense of exhaustion of a system that then suddenly, almost unexpectedly, just turns upside down. By the way, I was still with the privilege of being an outsider inside obviously a very dramatic and tragic in many aspects, with a lot of people dying, and unlike the Portuguese Revolution.
But did you have to flee?
Almost. I did got to a point where, so the situation evolved quite quickly at the end of, this is 2010. And it caught the bank by surprise. But with time still, when things starting to get a little bit complicated, because very shortly there was some resistance from the Praetorian Guard of the president. And this is a little bit more than that, but let's say from an armed perspective, it was a problem. So conflict starts to slowly erupt. There was time to evacuate non-essential personnel, so families, a lot of the staff left. The essential personnel stayed, me included, and we got to a point where we were asked to pack anything that fits a backpack. And that is one of those moments in life that you think, what is really important that I need to take with me, and fits a backpack.
And then did you go straight to Mozambique, or what happened?
No. So then the crisis was weathered. There was shooting. I had a tank in my doorway for 6 months. But then things slowly picked up. I still continued working in Tunis, and then at a given point, there was an opportunity to go work on the field, meaning one of the field offices away from the headquarters, and it was actually Zambia.
Oh, Zambia. Yes.
And I was still, the bulk of the work that I was doing was mostly on designing our multi-billion-dollar strategies for the countries, taking part of the large investment that we were doing with the private sector, and there was a part of it mostly I was focused on power, but then overall on the strategy. Meaning I was working across the continent, from Tunis, and then when I moved to Zambia, was slightly more focused on Southern Africa. And then I was in Zambia. I was supposed to stay there for a while, but through some developments, they asked me to move to Mozambique. And Mozambique had a great reputation for being, anyway, this is something that you know well.
Yes.
Because we do meet each other in 11 in Mozambique.
2011. And while you were doing that, and even while at Mozambique, did you find that purpose? Were you happy with the sort of work, or were you a bit disappointed with the outcome of working for a big organization anyway, which is very bureaucratic and all the difficulties of living in Africa, of course, of working in Africa?
A few points on that. One thing that came clear from working with almost a quasi-state enterprise, right? An organization like this is, in essence, almost international public administration, is that bureaucracy comes often as a byproduct of making sure that public money is well spent.
Yeah.
And I think this was interesting and important to internalize.
All grants that come
Sure.
from.
Yeah. So all those costs that usually we see, this, oh my God, these costs, the delays, they exist not necessarily, they exist for a reason. Now, they can be minimized, of course, but there is a reason behind it. And I think it's important to keep that one. And I took that when I entered this organization, and I understood there was this sort of levels of reporting bureaucracy that was needed. My first approved project when I entered the bank was a whole public sanitation project for 12,000 people. So I usually like to laugh. I think I can say this on this video, that my first project, people were defecating on it. And I think that work that I was doing, it changed lives. And I think I could see that.
Impact.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of the work that was done. I'm very proud of my contribution. I had amazing experiences and amazing sort of reward for the product of what we've done across these 10 years. It was also hard in many ways, hard and testing of my own integrity, of my own purpose again, and the trade-offs that inherently come with this line of work. After 10 years, I did come to a point that I felt that I needed to come to a close. Or
which year was this?
17.
2017. And so what happened later after that? 2017, you went back to school.
I said, I need to stop. I need to stop what I'm doing, or I will far away from who I am. And at that point, I already had done a few those executive courses at Harvard, and I felt for a while that there was something else that I wanted to learn and give, and this idea of then going to Harvard and apply. I did apply for the Harvard Kennedy School for a master in public administration, which is sort of a public or private public version of the MBA at the business school that you did. And again, another point that our lives can intersect. And this is in the end why we're here today. In a way, we'll get there. So I did it was transformational in many ways, especially at the point that I was coming from exhaustion. It sort of kind of re-energize and areas that somehow were sort of kind of parked in my life. There was a lot of work in leadership, personal growth that came with the entire process. It's part also of the learnings. Explore new areas of thought, and you've been there. This whole idea of the firehouse that comes and you just try to drink as much as possible and grow with that, right?
This was like 2 years, right?
No, the master is in intense 11 months, so it's a full year. But then already during the master, I start being a teaching assistant for some courses, and then I got invited to stay as a fellow there with the Center for Public Leadership, working on responsible investing and working with sovereign wealth funds and pension funds on how do they see their transformational effect on the economy, especially on the social dimension of investments, which was another complete different experience. Instead of coming from either the fast-moving financial sector that was also present in a conversation, or the multi-country entities. Some of these wealth funds are almost like that. But coming as this idea of the applied research and bringing knowledge, articulating with the different entities, and see what moves, what the impact.
And this is when you started being more keen on sustainability, basically?
Well, I mean, the frameworks with the African Development Bank started there, right? I was in the team for our green growth initiative. We did a lot of this sort of development impact assessments, and there was a whole plethora of safeguards and sustainability thresholds for all investments. So, and to be fair, a lot of what the later ESG and sustainability financing industry, what then they drinked from what the development banks were doing, what the World Bank was doing, what the African Bank was doing. The frameworks were there developed, right? So that was sort of already framing the applied research done in Harvard. Really took it more into let's put it this way, to the financial players' activity. So working directly with investment funds, working with some ties at times with venture as well, and then see what does this responsible, sustainable, and there's a kind of a broad umbrella of investment can be, and what is the role it plays on mainstream finance. This is a conversation, by the way, at the time that the main topic is the energy transition and all that.
And this is more or less when we then reconnected, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And you started advising Indico on sustainability, and how did that go?
I think it was. I don't know if you remember the conversation, but it was. I actually remember very well, because you were visiting Boston. You were visiting Harvard, and we had a dinner. We laughed around a lot about whatever shared experiences we had and whatnot. And then you were talking like, well, listen, we're launching Indico. This is 19, right? So you're just kind of formally launched. You're launching your first fund, and you're excited. There's a lot of stuff happening, and you said at that point clearly, Indico has this willingness to look at the sustainability aspect of our activity, and it would be great if we could collaborate on this, right? And at that point, this part I remember very well, because it's something that I always bring with me. I was like, I'm very happy to help you. I hate ESG. And it was this like, don't ask me to do ESG, because this is, I can structure this, but this is not what I believe.
You're already ahead of your time.
Yeah. We had extensive conversations around this topic. I still am critic of a lot of the sort of implications of what ESG framework is.
Right.
But that was fantastic work I think we started doing. And this you might remember as well. We submitted Indico's application to the Principles of Responsible Investing from the United Nations.
Yes.
And at that time, I started engaging with them. And Indico was one of the very first early stage tech funds.
Yes, in the world.
Exactly. And this is 19.
Very surprised.
I couldn't believe it. Like, it's like, guys, we're working on these. Tell us. It's like, no, you tell us. Oh, okay. So we were doing.
We were pioneers.
Indeed, for early stage venture, for sure. And I think, again, it was only in 19, and it feels so far off of where we are today. And we kind of full on the sustainability, and then again. So it's fantastic to look back in a space of not even
10 years.
No, not even a fund.
Not even a fund's lifetime, yeah.
Exactly. How things have shifted and evolved. We learned so much. I am very pleased with that. But then again, it's not the full story, right? Because I was working, advising with you guys and doing some other things at the time. Yeah. Still in Boston, because I was still working with the Harvard Kennedy School, and we went through pandemic, and then this is in the middle of the pandemic. I mean, it was not on the lockdown; it was kind of right after. Right. There's this moment where you come and go and say, like, I think there was some convo that happened. And it's like, hey, why don't we do an impact fund? And it's like, oh wow, like that's sort of kind of cool. I want to do that. And then we start kind of devising in 20. In summer of 20, we started devising what would be
what could be an impact fund
for options, right? And here's something that is also funny. Eventually, after again a lot of struggles, we do manage to launch the Indico Blue Fund, which
was not an impact fund, by the way.
Exactly,
but
but how we started, like, no, it's not an impact. It's an Article 8. We can talk about it. There's a disclaimer going around now. No, but what was fascinating around it is that eventually we did manage to launch the Blue Fund. That, for all intents and purposes, is a very, very beautiful instrument of venture capital into helping ocean. I got a message on LinkedIn when I announced that. So like, we're launching Blue Funds, etc. And it was from a colleague. I'm not sure you actually met him. He was a Swedish diplomat in Mozambique that ended up being at the same time. I was at the given point the best man in the wedding, and he was there. We knew each other, and he says, "Hey, congrats, you finally did it." And I thought, like, what do you mean finally? Like, don't you remember we had this conversation back in 2014 or something like this, where I said, like, well, something that I'm always thinking is, honestly, something that I've thought about it was, launching an impact fund. And here, it's like, oh wow, that's actually very true. Something that I did harbor happened in an organic way, and and sort of made sense at the right time with a lot of the building blocks of the experience. Because one thing is telling this narrative like this, and
I think is actually doing it, right?
and any sometimes on this sort of arch, things might feel that they were sort of coming from one place to another, but there's a lot of building things that you come that are not necessarily at the first moment aligned to say, oh, it's going to be an impact fund. No, but there was this willingness, there was this experiences, there were the right people that you know, and then things come together at the right point, and you see the opportunity in taking it because it could have been, oh, sorry, this is not
for us. So now, a few years later, then we did the Blue Fund. It's reaching its maturity in terms of investment period, but it's still halfway through its life. What were the main? I mean, what is the Blue Fund? Where did it invest in terms of sectors and geographies and so on, stages? And what were the main lessons that you, was it what you expected or what? I mean, of course, the story is still being written because we're halfway through the fund.
Yeah.
But the investment period is finishing now and the portfolio is kind of built, right?
Yeah. I think that's pretty much where we are now. And also where we are also is a point of where we're starting to see the fruits of the work that we did, right? And it was hard work. And I think, I mean, now I'm going to talk for myself. You were there, so eventually you'll tell me about it. But I think it was quite different from what we expected initially. The whole idea was Indico will bring its track record of being exceptional good at bringing local talent to the global market and apply this to a nascent ecosystem full of opportunities that can be highly impactful, right? And I think in that sense, the Blue Fund is a child of its times. We were, again, one of the very first. Yes. Remember the meeting here
in the world.
In the world, it was the UN Ocean Conference in 2022. They were almost all of the early stage VC blue funds, and we were like 12. So we grew very out of that time. The portfolio is spread of a bit of the vintage. So we have a lot of blue biotech, new things, new organic things coming from the ocean that plenty of opportunities to replace legacy solutions that were not sustainable or usually per definition. The portfolio evolved then to get a fair share, which I think by the end of it is going to be looking at one of the major sectors around the digital ocean and the nexus between ocean and space. And we see this as inherently linked. There's a lot of what happens in the ocean that can only be monitored, connected, understood from space. And so these sectors are strong. Then we have into it also areas as aquaculture and even renewable energy that also play a strong role.
And deep tech in general.
And overall, these are deep tech solutions that take time to develop. And I think one of the learnings from this is that the typical VC structure has a role to play in the ocean economy, but is trained by its usual templates and constraints to be effectively applied to some of the requirements that are long-term development of deep tech industry. I think we did well. I think things are finally showing up, and I'm looking forward for what's coming. So, yeah.
And in terms of the entrepreneurs and the lessons that you got from backing all these entrepreneurs, the good things and the bad things, what were the main lessons of the last 2 years?
And I think it's actually that sort of circles back to the beginning of what we spoke about, what is an entrepreneur, what is a business person. I think there's still not a lot of entrepreneurs in the ocean space
economy
as we understand entrepreneurs, right? There's a lot of very intelligent people,
well-meaning people,
researchers, academics, or some of them business people that do not necessarily configure what an entrepreneur that has a certain journey to do with the capital that comes with them to then go fast, go global. Again, the solutions, the technologies are an important part of it. Another part is what is the mindset. And unlike the tech sector, that they come to us fast and furiously, the blue space runs on major cycles.
And it's also true that when you involve the physical world, everything gets more complicated,
Yes.
right? When you're doing just software, it's super easy to change and to scale or fail, but at least, it's an easy path. And when you're involved in, the physical world is super complicated and the potential for things to go wrong is much higher.
Yeah, I think that is the capital of knowledge that we accumulated with our experience with the Blue Fund that now places well for the new,
For the next generation.
the next generation. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good, André. Thank you so much for sharing the story that I know that we know each other very well and that I know, but it's always good to hear it in first.
No, I'm very happy with that. I'm happy also to be with Indico and the team and finding here a group of people that is fun to work with, that you can affiliate with your work ethics, and that you see that there's a mindset for contribution that is embedded in what we do. So I'm happy with that.
Great. Well, hope you enjoyed this episode. André, let's go back to our
best. I mean, thanks.